So I started playing the violin when I was 4. I grew up in Las Vegas as a little kid, and my mom was taking piano lessons, and it was terrible. So she was taking piano lessons in the house, and I would, when I was 4, watch the lesson, and then after the lesson, I would crawl up on the bench, and by ear, I would play everything that my mom was trying to learn. So they figured out that I had a propensity somewhere, somehow, for music. Nobody else in my family does. So they took me over to UNLV, and UNLV didn't have any piano teachers available. So they said, hey, let's put him on violin for 6 months and just see where it goes. And I started Suzuki. And for anybody that's familiar with that, you're supposed to sort of go through a book in 6 months. And I was the worst little violin player you will ever find in your life. They were begging me to stop. My parents were begging me to stop. It took me about a year and a half to get through book 1. And so there was this moment where they were like, hey, no propensity for violin. But I was really determined. And then it sort of all clicked. And so in the next 6 months, I went through books 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Sort of all of a sudden, it just came together, and I knew what I was doing. By the time I was 8 years old, it was 8 hours a day of practice, 5 days a week, 7 hours on Saturday, luxury, and Sundays off. So that was sort of my life growing up. I played Carnegie Hall when I was 10 and got into Juilliard when I was 10 in New York to study classical music. And then I, after years and years and years of doing that, figured out one day that I hate playing Mozart and I could never play Mozart again in my life. So I put it away and I said I was done. And I moved to Nashville in 97 because I sang with some guys and we got a record deal. So we thought we were going to be big and famous, and it didn't work out. But when we moved to town, I got a call from the studio orchestra called the String Machine, and they asked if I wanted to come in and audition. So I did. And I was accepted. And at the time, at least, I was the youngest person they'd ever had in a string machine. So I got to play on everything from Matchbox 20 to Alan Jackson records. And you show up in these huge sessions with all of these orchestral players, and they put the music in front of you, you sight read it, and then you stack it, and then you're done with it. So really intensive stuff. And while I was doing that, the band was sort of taking off, and we were actually, strangely, somebody else had played fiddle on a demo of a song that we cut, and we were going to hire a fiddle player. And I said, this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. I should be able to figure this out. So I made an immediate decision that I didn't want to waste any time learning Orange Blossom Special because there's 12-year-olds all over the world that play that better than I do. So I dissected a bunch of rock records. I took all of the old Eagles stuff and Boston stuff and anything I could find that had harmonized guitar parts on it and figured out how to replicate what I was hearing on a violin. So that was sort of the beginning of my fiddle journey. The band toured for several years and never made it. And then when I left the band, I got a call from a singer-songwriter in town named Phil Vassar that had written a bunch of hits. And Phil said, hey, you want to come out on the road with me? So that was my first time finding out that I could play and actually get paid to do it. So I was out with Phil for a couple of years that were amazing. Spent a brief amount of time transitioning there with Easton Corbin. And then while we were out on tour with Easton, I reconnected with the band Perry's drummer, Boone Dodrell is a good friend of mine, and we'd known each other for 10 years. And the Perrys were opening for us, and I went out there, and I've told Kimberly this a million times, I went out there to make fun of them because the only thing I heard was Hip to My Heart, so I thought they were going to be terrible. And I went out and I watched the show, and I thought, man, she's a star, and she's just great. And so I walked up to Boone after the show, and I said, hey, if you guys ever need a fiddle player, I would love to come out on this gig. And a couple months later, I got the call out of the blue, and they said, hey, we can't guarantee you the job, but we need a fiddle player on Friday. So I called my wife, and I said, hey, I'm going to quit the day job I have with Easton Corbin that's paying our bills, and on the if come that the band Perry will hire me. And that was 5 years ago, and I'm now the band leader, which means I'm in charge of arrangements and sort of a liaison between the Perrys and the band, and I execute the live show every night, basically. And while I do that, I play fiddle, piano, dobro, acoustic, whatever they need me to play on anything is what I play. So that's my day job now, and it's a lucky one. I'm very lucky to have it. My favorite violinist growing up, and it's funny because Itzhak Perlman is sort of the famous name of a generation. And I'll never forget when I was a kid, Itzhak Perlman came up, he was teaching a master class at Juilliard, and he asked everybody who their favorite violinist was, and every little kid said, Itzhak Perlman. And it came to me, and I said, a guy named Michael Rabin, who's amazing. And Itzhak responded, mine too. So he's sort of like a not well-known violinist, but was incredibly recorded in his brief life. He died early, and was amazing. Was just he was far better than I'll ever be. So he was a hero as a violin sort of player. But, for rock and roll, for the thing that I do now, I mean, Richie Sambora was it's the first guy I ever saw on stage that I looked at him and I said, man, I want to do that. My first concert, he blew up on stage, smoke flying everywhere, and Richie's playing, and I sat there and I thought, that is so much cooler than what I do. And that still influences me every day. When I think about the shows, I still think about that first concert. The first concert's a lot like your first kiss. You never forget it. McPherson, for me, I remember my first road gig with Phil Vassar. We were playing, and I don't remember, somebody else had a McPherson. And there was this moment where everybody on stage was a sort of awe of his McPherson. It was like, oh, he's got a McPherson, he's got a McPherson. And at the time, I was like, yeah, what's the big deal? Eventually, I got to play one. And, I'm always realistic about the fact that, I make no bones about the fact that I'm not a great acoustic player. As a utility guy, I try and get by on acoustic. But even when I played the McPherson, was like, it's different. It's bigger, it's better, it's easier to play. And that sort of stayed with me for a lot of years. And it's funny because any road guy will tell you that once your gig gets good, you start to hear from a lot of guitar companies. And I always said no to that because to me, I played one guitar ever that I said, that's the one I want, and it was a McPherson. So when I got the gig with the band Perry, that was actually before Kimberly was playing McPherson. And I went in and told them they were still trying to figure out what guitar she was going to play. And I went in sort of passionately, gung-ho for the McPherson. And I think the reason for me is because they'll make this argument all the time where people will say, if you're a great player, you can play great on any instrument. I don't know that that's true. I think that there's a certain level of, I consider myself to be a great fiddle player. I think I'm really great at that. But I sound even better when I'm on a great instrument. And there's a moment where, especially when you're on the road, you need instruments that sort of speak for you. You need an instrument that you don't have to work your butt off to get some sort of a decent sound on. You need an instrument that you're not fighting, it's an extension of you. And that's what McPherson has been for everybody in the band Perry camp. I mean, once Kimberly had him, sort of the eyes were open to everybody saying, that's the one I want, that's the one I want to play. And if you ever see the band Perry on stage, you'll note that every single acoustic that we have up there, no matter which guy's playing it, is a McPherson. And that's because, they sound great, they're easy to play, they're beautiful instruments. It's sort of a combination of all of them. It's also a branding thing. I think McPherson there's a sort of synergy that they have with the people that play them. And I think there's sort of a loyalty back and forth. There's a moment where if I have the smallest problem, I know that I can get it fixed. If I have a need, I know it can get taken care of. And at the same time, McPherson knows that we're taking care of those instruments and we're doing our best to make those instruments sound great. It's easy to get an amazing acoustic, and in my case, I'm playing McPherson fiddles. It's easy to get those and want to put them on the wall and make sure nobody touches them. But that doesn't do service to the instrument, to the company, or to the players. So the amazing thing is that we go out on the road and we play these guitars all the time because they sound great, they sound full, they sound big, and they make you sound even better than you might be as a player. They really accentuate everything that you do well, and they hide what you don't do well.